Our goal is to just be a small part of your faith journey. The summit of your prayer life is the Mass, and we can't do that. So, even like by definition, we cannot be your prayer life. We can just be some small part that helps you to build a daily habit, helps you to kind of rediscover your faith and to grow deeper and to relight it on fire.
Hallow is the most popular prayer app in the world and the most popular Catholic app. It offers audio-guided meditation sessions to help you grow in faith, peace, and a relationship with Christ. Listen in as I sit down with one of the co-founders and CEO of Hallow, Alex Jones, where we discuss the origins of the idea for the app, Alex's journey of faith, and the incredible growth since its inception. Benedictine College is transforming culture in America, one conversation at a time. From our studios in Atchison, Kansas, these are the Benedictine Dialogues. All right, Alex, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. It's a blessing.
Yeah, so happy to have you here on campus. So happy with the partnership with Benedictine and Hallow, and really been looking forward to this conversation. I know a lot about Hallow, but I've never really met you. So.
Yeah, well, it's great to connect. Yeah, it's a beautiful campus. We got to celebrate Mass here earlier. Yeah, it's a blessing.
Terrific. Is this your first time to campus?
This is my first time to campus.
Okay.
But I love it. Yeah, it's
excellent.
Awesome.
Well, I thought to kind of get us started, have our viewers and listeners learn a little bit more about you. What's your story? Have you always been a Christian, and kind of how did you end up in this position where you've got the number one prayer app in the world?
Jesus has the number one prayer app in the world, but he lets me work on it for a little bit. No, unfortunately not. So I was raised Catholic, but fell away from my faith in high school and in college. Would have considered myself agnostic or atheist for most of that time. And sadly. But yeah, when I graduated, I got really into meditation. It was something about the spiritual life or the contemplative life that had always just fascinated me. But so I wanted to learn about meditation. Unfortunately, my mind did not first go to St. Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, but kind of secular meditation. And I was about to go to India for a couple weeks to try to learn how to meditate. But Headspace and Calm, which were kind of these secular meditation apps, had just launched. And they were a lot cheaper than the flight to India. So I started using them, and I loved them. I thought they were great tools. It felt like almost technology without technology. You could pick a session. It was like a personalized journey, personalized guide. You plug in your headphones, you press play, you close your eyes, and you're kind of led in this technique of meditation. Just 10 minutes before work, super simple. And so I started doing it every day, but something started happening, which is every time I would meditate, my mind was usually so busy with YouTube, Netflix, social media, work, relationships, worries, stresses, whatever, that when I started to kind of try to recollect myself, my mind kept feeling pulled towards something spiritual. So like the name Jesus or an image of the cross or the words Holy Spirit or something, which I thought was very strange because I would have considered myself agnostic. And so I started reaching out to priests I knew, brothers and sisters who were deeper in their faith life, pastors, and asking them this question, which I thought was a really interesting question, which was, hey, is there any way there's some sort of intersection here between this meditation thing and this faith thing? And pretty much everybody laughed at me and said, yeah, we've been doing it for 2,000 years. You probably should have heard about it. It's called prayer. And I was like, I know about prayer. Prayer is the hey, thanks for stuff, sorry for stuff, help me with stuff, or the things that I memorized as a kid. And I had a priest say, well, okay, that's great. You're talking to God, but have you ever tried to listen for him? And I was like, I don't know, what does that mean? He doesn't speak audibly usually, to me at least. And I started learning about this whole world of contemplative and meditative prayer within the church that I'd never heard of before. Things like Ignatian spirituality, imaginative prayer, Carmelite spirituality, prayer of recollection, chant, all these things. And so I sat down, I Googled how to do Lectio Divina, randomly opened up a Bible to Matthew 6, which is where the disciples ask Jesus to teach them how to pray, and he gives them the Our Father. And in Lectio Divina, you pick a word that sticks out to you and you meditate on it. And the word that stuck out to me was Hallow, and hallowed be thy name. And it was just 10 minutes in my living room, but it just changed my life. Brought me back to my faith. It's the most important part of who I am. It made me do this crazy startup thing, quit my job, do all this craziness. But it was just this beautiful combination of this deep sense of peace with, though, this depth of meaning and purpose and wrestling with something real. So hallow means to make holy. Okay, is God trying to make me holy? Am I letting him make me holy? Am I supposed to be helping other people grow in holiness? And the answer to all those questions for me at the time was no. I wasn't doing any of those things. I was doing my own career for my own career's sake, trying to get ahead. And so it was really stressful questions because it was like you're doing the wrong thing with your life. But it was in this place of deep peace. And so I knew I needed to do that for the rest of my life. And I wanted the app. I liked the structure of the app. And so we built the first version really just for me, but then God did some crazy things with it. But yeah, so that's short answer to no, I was not always a Catholic.
Yeah. I'm always interested in people who are raised Catholic, who spend time away. Was it an intellectual thing? Was it, you just didn't like it, or it was boring? Or I'm always kind of interested because then when you come back, it's interesting how your path led through a desire for peace, a desire for a contemplative life. I'm sure there was intellectual arguments along the way as well that you had to kind of wrestle with too. But I'm always kind of interested. John Henry Newman talks about people coming into the faith or assenting to a truth. It's all these combinations of like relationships and conversations and moments of prayer, moments of insight and stuff. So what were some of those moments in both your exit, or if you will, just your agnostic years, or your comeback?
Yeah, I mean, that was a very simplified version of my journey.
Sure.
The actual version would take a book probably and it's a bunch of parallel things happening at once and God working through a bunch of different people at once. And, I don't have a great answer to, why did I fall away? It wasn't like a conscious decision. I grew up, I went to a public school. Most of my friends didn't take their faith seriously. And it was kind of just the assumption of this, that I've now, after having been exposed to some philosophy and theology, but like this scientism, this science is what's real and true, and our parents just did this religious thing because they're silly and, their parents did it. And it's the traditional stuff, and that's old, and there's no old man in the sky judging you or whatever. There's no evidence for that and all that stuff. That, kind of the Dawkins, the simplified new atheism view. And that was just kind of the environment with which I was in, my friend group, my school, and that's just kind of the philosophy I adopted. Despite, my mom would take us to mass every week, and my mom took her faith very seriously. And despite that, it was kind of just this rejection of that, which kind of happens naturally as a teenager, right? You try to rebel against your parents anyway. But there was a really important, I took a couple of classes at Notre Dame in undergrad. There was a philosophy of science class, which was actually really helpful, that kind of looked at the underpinnings of the philosophy of science. And then there was a couple theology classes too. And C.S. Lewis was super helpful. There's this book called Doing the Truth in Love by Michael Himes, which is just kind of basic theology 101, but not really what the church teaches, and was just helpful to understand. So a bunch of those things, I had a bunch of friends who were much deeper in their faith, much more intellectually advanced in their faith. So, a bunch of conversations throughout college. And I do think God, through a good chunk of those books and courses, kind of cracked open the idea that okay, well, maybe it's not just this stupid thing. Maybe there's actually people a lot smarter than me who believe this thing and have thought through it really intentionally. And Bishop Barron was a big chunk of that. I watched a bunch of old school YouTube debates with priests and all this stuff. But the thing for me was, and this is again kind of like a parallel intellectual path to the spiritual path, but the funny thing for me was I would be convinced, I would read Mere Christianity and I'd be like, okay, I'm a Christian, for sure. Or I'd watch a sermon and I'd be like, yeah, okay, that I 100% believe. And then I'd listen to Sam Harris give a talk or an argument, and I'd be like, okay, maybe I'm an atheist now. And so I just keep, people are just better logical debaters than I am. And so I just kept waffling between these two things, and I was like, man, there's got to be a better way to figure out this fundamental reality of life, the most important part of your life, other than just whoever is the most eloquent, whoever's the most convincing, whichever person happened to be the most compelling. And to me, and I was really struggling with that. And so, and that kind of happened towards the end of my college career into my professional career. And prayer was kind of the one thing that was okay, of all the things within Christianity, there's the historical arguments, there's the theological arguments, there's all that stuff, but what can you actually test out for yourself? And prayer is that thing where it's well, if you could actually talk to the guy we're all debating whether they exist, like if you could pick up the phone and call him and he would answer, or you could have a conversation with him or whatever, that would feel like a pretty compelling, that would probably do it. And so prayer to me, in parallel to discovering kind of this meditation thing, had become this interesting piece of like, well, maybe prayer is a potential answer, but I just never had anything that was beyond what felt like talking to myself in my own head. So yeah, there was certainly a bunch of kind of a parallel intellectual path, which was super important to me. But for me, the real conversion happens when I actually had an interaction with Jesus, like a personal conversation with him, And I think the intellectual side, certainly, like, Bishop Barron will say the 5 ways is what compelled him to such a strong faith. But I do think, and there's a beauty in that, and there's a beauty in the truth. And I think the church is doing a great job of like leading with the truth of the faith and how it's not just this dumbed down religion thing. There's actually this like rich tradition of philosophy and theology behind it. That's way beyond what, a simple guy like me could understand. But at the same time, there's this beautiful spirituality, this beautiful peace, this beautiful relationship with God. And so now to me, like if you ask me, okay, hey, does God exist? Before it would have been like, well, okay, I have these 5 arguments or whatever. Now it's like, yeah, for sure. It's like, well, are you sure? Are you totally sure? And it's like, well, I mean, proving God doesn't exist to me now would be equivalent to proving my wife doesn't exist. Like, maybe you could do it, maybe we're all like just little brains in a bowl or whatever, and there's just, but we're all in a simulation or whatever. But it's like, my wife is real. She's the most real human relationship I have. But even more real than that is my relationship with God. I talk to him every day. He talks back to me. It's this ongoing conversation, not just every day, literally every moment of every day. And so, yeah, I don't know, the spirituality to me just really radically changed things. And it was a blessing that I got to experience that.
That's awesome. I think it's interesting too, because especially during a time where there's just a lot of noise, and to your point, there's a lot of talking heads arguing both sides of a lot of different points, that you can get kind of lost in the melee of all of that we're going on with social media and stuff. That sort of like a path of the peace of soul as a route of introducing people to these ideas. I think that's just a fascinating kind of new kind of third way of like, the anxiety riddled world you live in, there's a way to deal with that. There's a way to release that from your soul. It's called prayer. It's called meditation. And I find it very interesting, especially that in the secular world, you have like things like Headspace and these others, that the idea of meditation is growing everywhere. I mean, even when I was in college 20 years ago, they were talking about it in kinesiology, getting your athletes to meditate before games because they have to quiet the outside noise. So there's this culture kind of coming up and it's been happening for a while, I would imagine, but of a desire for just peace of soul.
Yeah. I think it's a really exciting opportunity for evangelization and for the church. I think like truth is a really awesome, like we need people who are preaching and teaching the truth of the church's teaching and the truth of the gospel. Beauty is another one. Beauty and art and music and all these things can really attract people. But I do think peace and the offer that Christ has of peace, come to me all you who are weary and I will give you rest. It's this, I think it's really attractive, especially to young people. Like my little sister just graduated college and she gets, 50 notifications to her phone every minute. It's just like a Snapchat streak, a TikTok comment, whatever it is, and it's constant. And I hold her phone for like 30 seconds and I'm stressed. Like I physically feel my heart like I'm stressed. And I'm like, man, I couldn't imagine living a life like that all the time. Like that, and to grow up with that, like that's exhausting and so stressful. And I do think there's this fascinating thing with prayer and with peace and with spirituality, which is, I was in Silicon Valley for a few years, which is not the hotbed of Christianity or Catholicism in the world. And you go around and you ask anybody like, hey, are you religious? No, nobody's religious anymore. Are you kidding me, man? What are you, 1960? And so no one's religious. No one would call themselves religious. You say, are you spiritual? And they all say, yeah, of course I'm spiritual. It's really important to me. And maybe some people meditate. And you'll say, okay, you meditate. And you're sitting, there's no other people in the room with you while you're meditating. And you get into your meditation. Are you alone in that room? And no one says, yeah, I'm alone. They all say, yeah, there's something else there. It's like, okay, well, shouldn't that be the most important thing in the world? Like as soon as you still calm as soon as you focus your mind You realize there's some invisible force among you? Like, that's crazy. Shouldn't that be your whole life is dedicated to figuring out what that is? But I do think the spirituality thing, you can attack it, maybe attack's the wrong word, you can approach it from two different things. One could be like, okay, I'm spiritual but not religious. And the one argument, which Bishop Barron or Father Mike or anybody would do a lot better than me, is, well, does it really make sense to be, can you really separate those two words? What does it mean to be spiritual? You're having a relationship with something else, you just aren't defining it, and religion defines that. It gives you a community, it gives you practices to grow deeper and all these things. So you can't really pull out, so you can argue. And then you can argue about like, well, here's the church teaching on this, and this is why we believe this, and all these things, which is super important to have. But the other angle is to say, okay, you're interested in spirituality, not religion. Well, put that aside for a minute. I have this really cool spirituality I'd love to share with you. Yeah, it happens to be associated with the church, but it's really cool. It's this incredible, life-changing, contemplative and meditative practice. Can I share it with you? And then you get them just to sit for 10 minutes. And you don't talk, God does. You structure it in the right way, scripture and all those things, but God does a lot better job of evangelizing than we do. And so we get countless stories from people. I mean, stories from people who haven't been to church in 30 years, who pray for the first time on the app, spend like 5-10 minutes in silence, and they hear God speak directly to them, and they go back to confession and mass the next day. And it's just like, man, like if we just, I think God gives us a lot of tools to reach out to people, but I do think this offer of spirituality and prayer and peace is, for us really exciting as a way to reach out to folks who have fallen away.
Yeah. We talk a lot about on this show kind of the fact that a lot of our culture has gotten flattened. And so in the sense that we aren't prepared for a transcendent experience very much because we're so blasted visually, we're blasted audially. But then in moments like that, it kind of forces you to calm. And I think it opens you up to a transcendent moment. It opens you up to something beyond yourself, and they're experiencing it, whether they want to call it God or whatever they want to call it. But there's something there that you're responding with, right? And so I just love that that's a unique way to evangelize today. Let's just talk to people about contemplation, about meditation. I mean, it's funny to me that the church has been doing it for 2,000 years, and now the psychologists are saying this is really good for psychological issues and mental issues.
Yeah. Well, it's like everything.
Meditate and pray.
It's like, cold showers are good for you. And it's like, okay, the monks have been doing that for 2,000 years. It's like, oh, well, you should pray it's fascinating how culture keeps coming around to these. And same with business too. Like you've got Soul Cycle, which is pretty much like some like mini little religion. Like you've got all these things that are trying to build community and trying to build a belief system and values. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's the core of that is faith. But yeah, we just get really, I think we often treat religion when we're talking to new folks like politics, where you're like arguing over certain issues because our world is so political. But you're like, okay, this is why I believe this, and these are the 3 reasons. But if instead you treated religion like what it is, which is a relationship with someone, it is you have a friend and you are a son of a father. You have a very good friend, the best friend in the world in God. How would you introduce someone to your friend? You wouldn't be like, hey, these are my friend's political beliefs and these are why the teachings on, and this, if you disagree, you'd just be like, hey, you should talk to my friend. Yeah. It would be great to introduce you to my friend. Let's talk to him together. Let's have a dinner together. Let's have a conversation. And I don't know, for us, we just see God do incredible things through just introducing people to a conversation with him what does it mean to listen to God? Try. Just sit down and try. Give him 10 minutes. Just silence. Just give him 10 minutes. And he does really pretty incredible things when you do it.
Yeah. So tell me more about, remind me the year it launched. When
late 2018.
2018.
So it's been about 5-6 years.
So what was your expectation going into it versus what it is now, right?
My expectation, we built it just for me. My expectation was I would use it. I would learn how to code a little bit, and maybe my aunt would try it or my mom, and then say like, "Oh, good try." Yeah. My mom, my mom hates when I tell this story, but she was like, "Yeah, no, I would never use that thing." So she's super Catholic. She's like the core faithful rock of our family, but she was just like, yeah, I would never use an app to pray. Which, to be fair, it's a weird pitch to someone who takes their faith seriously. You don't need an app to pray. Certainly, you don't need an app to pray. But there's something you kind of have to give it a try. It's hard for me to be like, oh, well, the audio component, you like close your eyes, it's Father Mike, it's whatever. But yeah, you kind of have to just give it a try. So she does. Now she uses it all the time and just texts me whenever there's whenever there's bugs. But no, I mean, I would have never imagined. I mean, like if I looked out in a room and we had 10 people in this room and we were all using the app, that would blow my mind.
Wow.
Like that'd be crazy. Then 1,000 is, whoa, that's a lot of people. 10,000, 100,000. We just crossed 20 million downloads.
Wow.
It's like, that's just beyond my wildest expectations of what God could do with it. But the thing is, the coolest part by far, so the numbers are fun. You get like massive spikes. We were by the grace of God, the #1 app in the App Store for Lent, which no faith-based app or meditation app or workout app or wellness app or any of those categories of app had ever cracked the top 10. And you look at all the other 9 apps that are in the top 10, they all have 10,000 plus employees. We have 80. But we have Jesus. The numbers are fun and it's cool because I get excited about trying to help the church and trying to be some little dent that maybe ticks around the West's trajectory. But most importantly, they represent people. And like way cooler than the numbers of 10 million, 20 million. It's just these stories we get from these people. And there was a girl who wrote to us the other day, a young woman who was raised religious but fell away from her faith. And her mom, she was having a really tough time, was very depressed, very anxious. Her mom had downloaded the app onto her phone, but she'd never created an account or whatever, but she'd never used it. She decided one day to end her life, tragically. She climbed into a bathtub, filled it with bubbles because she said she wanted it to be a pretty death, 15 at the time. And she looks up at the ceiling and she says, God, I don't believe in you, but this is your last chance before I do this. If you're real, prove it to me. And she has the little phone next to her on the bathtub and she presses play on a random session. And it was a meditation on Christ's passion and how he died for us so that we didn't have to. And she says she didn't know what happened, but she realized in that moment that Christ was there in the room with her, grabbed her hand, lifted her out of the bathtub, and she dedicated the rest of her life to Christ. She's a missionary now serving the inner city for, oh my gosh. I mean, it's just this incredible story. And she just wrote to us and said, I just wanted to let you know I'm pretty confident I would have ended my own life if it wasn't for your app and the grace that God gave me through it, which is just like, what? Yeah. Like, how cool is that? Like, I would work hard for like some fun numbers, whatever, but I would work for the next 50 years, however long I'm allowed to live here, for the rest of my life. Everything blows up, everyone hates me, everything goes up in flames, everything is lost. And you told me that at the beginning, but that one girl writes in that story. And I get to be some small part of that journey. It's like, yeah, I'd do that 100 times over. Of course I would. Who wouldn't? You'd have to be crazy not to do that. And we get those notes literally every day, every week, from people who, we had a guy who had been addicted to drugs for 30 years, who wrote to us and said, for the first time, I'm sober for 55 days, thank you. We had a guy who said he was his marriage was falling apart. He was a terrible husband, a terrible father. And he said, for the first time, I'm turning it around. Someone who hadn't been to church in 30 years, who goes back to Mass for the first time. We have moms who have lost their only kids, who haven't been able to eat or get out of bed because of the grief and the pain, and they're able to find some sense of hope and peace again. I mean, it's just these incredible stories. And so for us, that's like what really blows us away is, whoa, I had no idea that God would be able to do that. And the coolest part is he makes it so obvious that he's the one doing it, because we never write a meditation for that. We never write a meditation for someone about to end their own life. And even if we did, that wasn't the one she meditated on. She just meditated on probably just a Lenten meditation on his passion. It had, nothing to do with her particular situation, or like a mom who lost her only son. We never wrote a meditation on that. And yet somehow, like in that silence, God reaches out and picks her up. It's like, yeah, like that's awesome. So anyway, that's by far the coolest part of what we get to do.
Man, that's amazing. It sounds almost exactly like what John Paul II had in mind when he talked about the new evangelization, taking the newest technologies, taking the newest ways of communicating with people, and bringing hope. I mean, like if that's what you're doing, that means you're doing what John Paul II and what Christ wants for the church. And so, praise God for that, man. That's awesome. I also would be interested in there's the benefits of a guided meditation versus trying to do it on your own. You
Yeah.
know? And so what would you say to someone who was trying to decide between those two?
I mean, my own life has been an interesting experience personally. You know, I bounce back and forth. I use the app every day. You know, for me, usually, and now it's been whatever, 6-7 years since I really came back to my faith. And so I've been spending, you know, a lot of time in meditation. And there's a lot of, it's interesting. It's hard to pitch. You really just got to give it a try. But for a lot of people, it can be a lot of different reasons that they use it. For me, it can be pretty helpful for a rosary. If I'm like driving or doing the dishes or something and I don't have the beads or I can't count. So the rosary I do most days. Daily mass readings on my way to mass is helpful for me to like enter into the readings once in case, you know, I don't totally hear what the priest is saying or the lector as they're reading it. I do the surrender novena every day, just 9 days on repeat. It's like life-changingly powerful. And, you know, I don't really want to carry around the little book that has the Father Delinda Ruotolo passages in there. And I'm on a walk or I end a call and I've got like 5 minutes before the next call or meeting or whatever it is. And so I just plop in a little surrender novena or the Divine Mercy Chaplet. About half the time I do a Divine Mercy Chaplet, I do it with the beads, and half the time I do it with the app. But then people really seem that we have a lot of content on the app. And so a lot of, it's like reading a book, but in audio. And I don't know, there's something about audio to me that allows you to enter into prayer and meditation pretty easily because you're not looking at a screen, you're not looking at anything. Usually you're closing your eyes or you're on a walk, you're looking at nature or whatever it is. And so you can listen, it's like a friend is walking alongside you. And it's kind of just like you get to go on a retreat with Father Mike every day, or a retreat with Jonathan Rumi from The Chosen every day, or a little retreat with Bishop Barron every day. And it's just like, you know, most people pay a good chunk of money to go on a retreat, maybe once a year, maybe once every 3-4 years with one of those guys. Or Sister Miriam or Sister Bernice, these like incredible meditative leaders, Father Gallagher, who leads the Ignatian spirituality like training for a bunch of the new seminarians in the country. So they're just these incredible retreat leaders who can lead you in both deep spiritual reflection, but then from that, a deep contemplative and meditative and spiritual session. And it's just like you get to go on like a little mini retreat with them each day. And so I do think the power of technology in that sense is incredible. It's awesome. It's like I get to pray with Sister Miriam every day. And for me to go do that in person, I'd have to go to where she is, which is not my home. And she's pretty busy, so she's not really going to lead me in an imaginative prayer every day. And, you know, Jonathan Rumi like brings the scriptures to life for me in like a really cool and interesting and fun way. And then we do these seasonal challenges that there's also this daily reflection with Jeff Cavins where he kind of like opens up scripture in this really powerful way. But these seasonal challenges I like the best, and they're probably one of the more popular ones, which is, you know, it's just kind of a way to keep your faith life. It can get stale, you know, and you can fall into a routine. And so it's a way to kind of keep your faith life kind of like punched up and on fire. So we just did a big St. John Paul II Witness to Hope challenge for like 21 days where we journeyed through his life. We're doing a Saints in 7 Days series now for Advent. We do this whole kind of meditative journey. For Lent, we do this whole meditative journey. And so, you know, it's kind of just this way for you to spice up your faith life and keep it, you know, keep yourself pushing to grow deeper in a relationship with God, because we all have so much of an opportunity to grow deeper. But yeah, and a lot of people actually, you know, loneliness is a big thing too. And, you know, a personal prayer life is a big thing. Like you should pray alone for sure. You should spend time in silence. And we have unguided sessions where it's just like a timer. So if you just have 20 minutes, it's like instead of just your really annoying iPhone timer or whatever, it's like a softer bells or whatever it is. So I do those for like 20 minutes in silence, which is really powerful. It can be a bit intimidating, like if you're new to sitting in silence for 20 or 30 minutes, which is why we have a good chunk of the guided sessions. But the loneliness thing, yeah, a lot of people just find it helpful to be like, I feel like I have a friend who I get to pray with every day. And it's not like I get to journey with the global church through this. And so, yeah, for us, I don't know, a lot of people find that pretty powerful. But I think it's a balance. Like Hallow is just, our goal is to just be a small part of your faith journey. Like we obviously can't, we're Catholic. The summit of your prayer life is the Mass, and we can't do that. So, you know, even like by definition, we cannot be your prayer life. We can just be some small part that helps you to build a daily habit, helps you to kind of rediscover your faith and to grow deeper and to relight it on fire. And so it should be a balance between, like, you sit in silence for 20 minutes and then you do a rosary, and one day you do a rosary with the app and one day you do a rosary with the beads. And, it should be this small part of people's faith life. And so that's what we found. But it's been, awesome to watch what God does with it in people's lives.
That's awesome. Reminds me, in a previous episode, I talked about Dante with a guest, and we both said you have to have your Virgil. You have to have someone guiding you through these, especially in difficult moments, because sometimes you don't know the right questions to ask. Sometimes you don't know the right things to say. It's often very hard, too, to really self-examine by yourself. It's better if someone else is asking you these questions and kind of going through it with you. So the guide, to me, is a very valuable resource.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like why do we have spiritual books? Like, why did the saints write writing? Like, yeah, the gospel's awesome. Like, you should read the gospels. But the saints, like, bring it to life in such a beautiful, powerful way that we just, for Lent, we did this Father Chiswick journey.
Oh, nice.
And, like, man, I've never seen anyone articulate surrender in such a beautiful way. And it just brought the idea of surrender to me to life in such a more powerful way than it had before. So yeah, it's just like getting to dive deeper into these incredible spiritual leaders, dive deeper into Scripture. But you said something that I forgot to mention, which is we actually hear this all the time, especially with people who are in really tough places, like people who had just lost a kid. I was just talking to a woman the other day, and she had just lost her kid, and she was like, I honestly, I couldn't pray. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't, I was so in shock. I was so heartbroken that I forgot how to pray the rosary. I needed someone to lead me. Like, I needed to be led. And so we just we just prayed on the app all day, like just rosary after rosary, Bible after Bible reading. And yeah, it was this new, it's like, yeah, when you're in those really tough times, it can, like, everything falls away. And so it is really helpful to have somebody leading you. But I don't know, it's funny because we never, we didn't like come up with any of these things. God just does them. Like, so he'll just, use it as a tool however he needs to, hopefully, for the building up of his kingdom.
Have you ever desired a deeper understanding of the life of Jesus? Check out The Extraordinary Story with Tom Hoops.
This is The Extraordinary Story, a podcast about the life of Christ. Jesus Christ, God Himself, entered the confusing maze that is our world to show us who we are and to give us His cross as a ladder up and out. This is His story and ours, The Extraordinary Story.
The Extraordinary Story has been featured in The Loop, Alatea, Our Sunday Visitor, and Relevant Radio. You can listen to The Extraordinary Story on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And now, back to the show. So I'm kind of interested in the denominational demographics that you have. What kind of demographics are downloading the app?
Yeah, at the beginning, it was almost all Catholics, pretty spread evenly across age ranges and genders, though, which was interesting for us. It started for us, and so the people that were using it were like our friends, and so it was like 25 to 35-year-old is the spike, but it's become pretty spread out, and you see a lot of people who, they're students. We have a lot of college students using the app, a lot of young adults using the app, a lot of people who are just, getting married or starting a family. Their kids start growing up, they become atheists. You worry, you start praying for them. You enter into retirement, you're nearing the end of your life, you have a lot more time, you go on a lot more retreats, you can dedicate a lot more time to growing deeper in your spiritual life. So it's been a pretty fascinating journey with like a really broad range of folks. And then over the last 2 years, it's been really interesting to see a lot of non-Catholic Christians start to download and check out the app, which is awesome. I mean, I'm authentically Catholic, we don't hide it. There's a rosary on the app, there's, Father Mike, there's all that stuff. But hopefully Hallow can be a place. And I think, prayer has this power, but hopefully Hallow can be a place where people can come from any background really, but certainly any Christian background, and find something where they can grow deeper in their relationship with God. Our first power user, funnily enough, power user is like people who use the app all the time. And we had a woman who used it, this was really early days. We had a woman who used it like 300 times in like 30 days. And so that's 10 times a day. And so we called her and we were like, what what? How are you doing this? What are you doing? And she was an evangelical Christian, and she just used it. She'd had insomnia, so she would wake up a couple times at night, and so she'd pray each time she woke up or whatever. And then she'd use it like 4 or 5 times throughout the day and 4 or 5 times throughout the night. So we're like, does the rosary stuff, like, does it bother you at all? And she's like, no, the rosary thing doesn't bother me. I mean, the vast majority of the stuff on the app's just meditations with scripture, which I would argue that rosary is also scriptural. But she's like, so I just don't do the rosary yet. And I was like, oh, you should try the rosary. But okay, that's awesome. And so we've just found this, I don't know, it's because what we're leading with is just a relationship with Jesus. And so we found this, a lot of folks who are Christian, but not Catholic, Protestants or evangelicals or whatever it is, non-denominational, find like an enormous amount of healing and spiritual growth through it too. So it's been a blessing to get to journey with brothers and sisters in Christ all around the world.
That's awesome. Well, I did have to ask how the relationship with Mark Wahlberg started off.
Yeah, Mark's a great guy. He's phenomenal to work with, takes his faith super seriously, has been really passionate about trying to do this work. We originally partnered with him on Father Stu. He was, he said he felt like God was asking him to use this chapter of his life to use the gifts that God had given him and the platform that God had given him to do to help build up God's kingdom on earth. And so we partnered together a little bit with Father Stu, and then he wanted to do a lot more work, helping people grow deeper in a relationship with God, and it's awesome. I mean, he has this really great way of, I don't know, it's very authentic, and especially for folks who have fallen away from their faith, he can like reach out in a way that doesn't feel preachy. And we've had a lot of stories of people who had not prayed for decades or had fallen away from the church forever. And they're like, you're just trying to get somebody to stop scrolling for half a second on a thing. And so they see Mark's face and they're like, wait, that's the guy from the Bear movies, right? And they're like, he's telling me to pray a rosary. Like, what? That's just the weirdest thing. And just because it's so weird, they're like, okay, I might as well see what the thing is. Yeah. And then they do, and then God like builds this incredible relationship with them through it. And so it's been an honor to get to work with him. He's been incredible. The funny story about Mark is, so he FaceTimes, and he's traveling all over the place and shooting whatever he's shooting, and so he'll FaceTime at pretty random times. And I didn't really know this, and so the first time we started working together, he just FaceTimes at like. He FaceTimes me when I'm sitting with my wife. It's like 8 p.m. on a Friday. And he just FaceTimes. We're talking about Father Stu and the work that we're going to do together. And this was kind of the first time I was talking to him, really. And he was like, oh, we're going to do Father Stu. We're going to help so many people grow closer to Jesus and the Lord. It's going to be awesome. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Oh, yeah. And he's like, Father Stu's going incredible. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And he's like, oh, we're going to help so many people pray. It's going to be incredible. And I was like, that's awesome. That's awesome. And then it's like a 30-second call. He hangs up, and my wife just sits there. It was like the most famous person I've spoken to in my life so far. I was pretty nervous, and she just looks at me, and instead of being like, oh, honey, that's really cool that you got to talk to Mark Wahlberg, she was just like, you said awesome a lot. and I was like, oh, thanks, honey. I'm going to be thinking about that for the next 3 years of my life. How many times I said awesome on a call with Mark Wahlberg. But anyway, no, he's great to work with. So we've, he does a really quick rosary on the app. So if you ever need a 12-minute rosary or something crazy, but he's a quick guy. He does everything at a pretty quick pace. So
that's awesome. I think also because people know of his life, he has a little bit of a checkered past that he's open about, but also that he's had this conversion in life and wants to change. That I think it inspires people. Like, I mean, if Mark Wahlberg's doing it, maybe I can too, right? Type of thing. So,
that was kind of all of Father Stu, like the Father Stu story. The core of that Father Stu story is some of the greatest saints, or some of the, I forget exactly the line, something about Augustine, but the most difficult sinners or whatever. Some of the greatest saints have come from some of the most difficult sinners, and they wouldn't let Father Stu into seminary because of his past. And it's just, I don't know, that's all of our stories. My story is a terrible story. I would, everything pre-Jesus, and even, still very much a sinner today, but it's, God does these incredible things and he chooses sinners to do them, so.
Absolutely. I also wanted to ask about the Super Bowl ad,
Yeah.
How that went and what kind of numbers you guys saw based off of that.
Yeah, that was a crazy one for us. There was no way in the world we were going to do it. But once every 12 years, the Super Bowl falls on the Sunday immediately before Ash Wednesday. And like Ash Wednesday is a massive spike for us. So we kick off our 40 days Lent challenge, prayer challenge, and it's by far the biggest day of the year. And yeah, once every 10 to 12 years, the Super Bowl falls on the Sunday immediately before it. So we're like, man, if there was a time to do it, this would be the time. And so we prayed about it, and the national spots had sold out, so we ended up doing a regional spot. And yeah, Mark we had already partnered with, and Jonathan, and so we ended up shooting something together. And it was crazy. We probably pulled that whole thing together in like 6 weeks, which it usually takes 6 months at least plus to do one of those. And yeah, it was a wild ride, but it ended up working out incredibly. The Sunday was a massive spike, and then we got a bunch of people kind of aware of it for Wednesday, which was which was the big kind of launch. And yeah, we jumped up to the #1 app in at least the country, if not the world, on that day. But yeah, it was, I think probably like in the week around that, it's probably like maybe a couple weeks, but around like 4 million downloads or something crazy during just that very short period of time. Yeah, so it was a crazy spike, but it was fun. It was cool and the funny part was we really didn't know if we were going to do it still. And I was like, well, you've got to have it's got to be a good ad. So what would we do? What would be a good ad? And we're thinking of all these different options. Like there was a funny idea, which there were some pretty funny ideas, but maybe we'll save those for the future. Or like, hey, somebody sharing their story, a bunch of different ideas. And then I was like, you know what? We are a prayer app, so why don't we just pray? And that's what it was. The Super Bowl commercial was just a prayer, and in this beautiful church. And that to me was like, man, if we could just pray, then there's going to be millions and millions of people watching the Super Bowl. Even if you don't download it, if we just get somebody to turn their mind to Jesus for like the first time in a decade or something, somebody who hadn't really thought of it, maybe you'd never try Hallow, whatever, but if you just spend like a minute in prayer during the Super Bowl at your little Super Bowl party or whatever, it's probably worth it. And probably not financially, but yeah, so it ended up working out phenomenally. So it was a crazy ride, but a fun one to be a part of.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I do have to say, Benedictine College is one of the partners that's working with Hallow.
Yeah, we're
and
blessed to be.
We have all of our students, faculty, staff all have access to Hallow.
Yeah.
And I believe our numbers are pretty good. So
yeah, you guys are great.
Yeah, so very happy
with
about
Franciscan
that.
there. Yeah.
It's not a competition, but we want to win. So
you gotta get a lot of people praying.
Exactly. So one of the things I ask all of our guests at the end, one of our big goals here, our big desire is to transform culture in America. And so what I would ask is, how do you see meditation and an increase in prayer transforming culture in America?
I was thinking about this weekend, and I was thinking about how entrenched our society is and how polarized. And it's an election year. It's going to be super political. Everybody's going to be getting in political fights. And, especially on the pro-life issue, but really on everything. It's just like this incredible entrenchment to your side. And technology, social media usually doesn't help. It just like entrenches you more and more and more. And the communities you're a part of and the people you interact with. And it just feels like, even within families, it's like people are just becoming so, divided. And some of these issues, like the pro-life issue, is an incredibly important issue. And so the question is, like, how do you change hearts and minds really? And how do you bring people together really? And it's not like, oh, I convinced you, although it's an important part, like you should have the strong arguments for why you believe what you believe. But it's usually not that. And I've like tried a bunch of arguments a bunch of times and they don't usually work. And the question really is like, well, the answer is you have to transform hearts. Like you have to. It's usually not beating somebody over the head with some better argument that's going to get them, because they just feel like they lost an argument. They don't feel like their heart's changed. And so then the question is, okay, well, how do you transform hearts? If you're going to transform the culture, all the culture is just a representation of a bunch of people. And those people are so stuck. We're all so stuck in our ways. And so then, how do you transform hearts? And I think the answer is the love of Christ, and the love of Christ that he gives you through prayer. And like if you just sit, and it's funny because I've gotten over the last 6 years, all I do is kind of dive deep and get to talk and get to pray with all these incredible spiritual leaders and all this phenomenal spiritual direction and contemplative life and meditative life. And it's all just like you spend your whole life in prayer. And it's like, okay, well, what are you supposed to take away from that? And what you take away from that is Christ's love for you. And it's overwhelming. And like you don't even understand a fraction of it. And it sounds so simple because it's like, yeah, of course. And everybody kind of, throws it away. Yeah, God loves me, whatever. But it's such a like immense pool of love for you that you can't help but love. It can't help but overflow into your life because you are loved so deeply despite your sin that you then have to go love everybody else. And so then, I don't know, for us, it's just how can we reach out to help people? All they have to do is just crack the door open just a little. And if you just crack the door open a little, the love of Christ just like pries it open the rest of the way. And if we can just help people to crack it open a little bit, let God soften all of our hearts because we all need it. I think that's how you transform the world, but certainly how you can transform culture. But I don't know if that's what we're trying, at least.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, likewise.
I'm sure we could talk for hours.
I'm sure.
This has been really great. Again, thank you so much for coming to campus.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your work with the app and in helping people increase their prayer life. I really think it's going to help transform the culture. So I really
praise
appreciate
God.
it, man.
I appreciate it. Yeah,
absolutely.
It was a blessing.
All right. Well, thanks to all of our viewers. Be sure to check out the Hallow app yourself if you're not currently using it. I know you will get so much out of it. And thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed the Benedictine Dialogues today, I want to invite you to visit our website, media.benedictine.edu. Be sure to subscribe to our weekly newsletter where you will receive all of the latest in your inbox, or subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Thanks again for watching. God bless.